So, right now, across cities, families, communities, there's a fundamental question being navigated. And that is, what the hell is going on these days? Right? I mean, is it just me or does it feel a bit harder as now groceries are $60 a bag? That's just normal. Gas prices, healthcare. If you can buy a house, your mortgage is ridiculous. Your rent, if you can't, is out of touch. What's happening is basically the question.
Well, you're right, Luke, but it's not just financially. It's emotionally, socially, culturally, even generationally. And in the middle of all this frustration and uncertainty, something bigger is beginning to shift. Our understanding of what home really means.
Right, and for a long time, that was kind of more predictable. Stability in home was relatively achievable, a place where you could take root, a place where futures could be planned, where identities, relationships, and memories could accumulate over time.
But today, many people are navigating a very different reality, one shaped by rising housing costs, migration, political instability, economic uncertainty, rapidly changing social conditions. And these are happening not just as isolated crises, but as overlapping pressures that are reshaping how people are imagining their futures.
As these pressures intensify, we start making really difficult calculations, things around how does opportunity exist and where does it exist? Where does stability even be possible? Where can it be possible? And where can we realistically build a meaningful life?
Over the past year, Luke and I have been researching how these shifts are transforming the meaning of home. And as second-generation Guyanese Canadians, these questions are deeply personal for us. Here is Luke and I, as young kiddos with each of our moms, so adorable. Growing up in Guyanese households, home meant family. It meant a lot of family gatherings. It meant someone's always cooking, right? Someone's making curry, there's cook-up, there's rotis happening, someone's playing music, either some kind of soca, Caribbean, or Motown. And the kids are just all kind of hanging out there. And so this is true not just for our cultures and our families, but for many families and cultures around the world. And in many ways, our work also kind of represented an attempt to better understand the journeys, sacrifices, and uncertainties that many of our families went through and also impacted our own understanding of home. So we began by exploring how these overlapping pressures, and when we say that, we're specifically talking about things like housing affordability, rising living costs, healthcare strain, economic uncertainty. All these things were kind of seemingly unfolding at the same time. And we noticed that these pressures were actually impacting how people were making everyday decisions about their lives. And as our work evolved, we kind of explored the relationship between uncertainty, migration, belonging, resilience, and the futures people were trying to create for themselves and the people that they cared about. Now, we focus particularly on two places deeply connected to migration and diaspora: Toronto, Canada, and Guyana, places that have shaped each of our families' histories.
And despite Toronto being the second largest diaspora of Guyanese in the world, these places are very different. I think we can all know that, even if you haven't spent much time looking at Guyana. But underneath that, there are some similarities. One of these places is currently kind of experiencing a lot of strain, affordability issues, housing is inaccessible, infrastructures and accessibility are in kind of antiquity and crumbling a little bit. And the other is undergoing rapid growth, transformation, that's been spurred on from oil discovery, extraction. The profits are just making a trajectory of extreme expansion and development. The really weird thing for us is our parents came to Toronto, Canada, to have opportunity, success, future, a better life, And that is actually the place I'm talking about when we're talking about these kinds of crises that are kind of happening. And I'm alluding to Guyana when I'm talking about newfound opportunity and newfound wealth. So despite that, though, through the research, we did find that both of these places are grappling with similar questions about home. And the question is, how do people build stability and belonging in a world that increasingly feels unstable?
What emerged was something larger than just housing alone, right? Because home isn't just about a physical structure. It's about belonging, care. It's about opportunity and security. And it's about the ability to, imagine a future for yourself somewhere.
And those conditions are no longer existing in a single place for a lot of people. They're not neatly packaged. So opportunity may exist in one country and, families in another. Affordability is here, safety is somewhere else entirely. Increasingly, people are being forced to negotiate between things.
Now, we heard this repeatedly throughout our research, right? People describing this emotional tension of trying to build multiple lives in kind of like multiple realities. Feeling connected in one place, but perhaps being dependent on another economically. Feeling pride in where they came from, but also questioning whether they could continue to build a future for themselves where they currently lived. Things like holding responsibility across borders, supporting family members in multiple countries, and ultimately trying to maintain identity and belonging across distance, time zones, and generations.
What's clear is that migration is not just about movement. It's not a mobility thing alone. It's about adaptability. People adapting to instability, adapting to rising pressure, adapting to systems that no longer feel predictable. And in many cases, adapting their understanding of what home needs to be or what it can be.
For some, home is more temporary. For others, more distributed, right? Less tied to ownership, less tied to permanence. And with a housing crisis happening globally, this can be seen and felt all throughout Toronto and Guyana. And increasingly, home feels more unstable. And when we talk about these housing crises, we're not just talking about accessibility and affordability. What we're talking about is the ability to create a viable home for ourselves somewhere. Because home is our relationships. It's our connection to care networks, to support, to flexibility. It's about our ability to remain resilient through change. And the place expected to provide steadiness increasingly becomes the place where these broader systemic stresses are felt more acutely.
Toronto's representing a side of this transition, and as I was saying before, for generations, Canada has been this land of opportunity, stability, upward mobility for newcomers. It's a conduit for newcomers. And that kind of realization, it was attainable. And for our families, it was achievable. I think Janine and I both kind of agreed that for our families coming from Guyana, they did achieve that level of stability. They did achieve that aspiration of family and future and success.
And at the same time, Guyana reflects another side of the story. As Luke mentioned, Guyana is currently experiencing rapid transformation driven by one of the most fastest economies in the world. Right? New infrastructure is emerging. Investment is accelerating. And for the first time, people across the diaspora in Guyana are beginning to experience these new possibilities for themselves in new ways. But with this rapid growth is also coming tension, right? There's questions around equity, accessibility, governance, displacement, and ultimately, who gets to benefit from this transformation?
And we talked to people in Guyana and Toronto across generations of the diaspora, and what was really fascinating was that despite the differences, there were these common constants, so these questions. What makes a future feel viable? What conditions allow people to feel rooted? And what happens when the conditions begin to shift faster than the institutions, systems, and communities can adapt?
One of the biggest kind of key understandings from our research was really understanding that home is not static. It's relational. It's a system. It's constantly shaped by these social systems, economic uncertainty, as well as cultural identity, your personal history, and external pressures that go far beyond any individual's control. And so because of that, home is not experienced equally.
Some people inherit stability. They're born into generational wealth, or their parents worked super hard and can offer them a business or investment in housing or some sort of support. But for other people, they spend their entire lives